Hello everybody, I'm MTGNerdGirl and I'm going to be doing a walkthrough with you guys of the new Dominaria United Draft format. Every time a new set is released for Magic, I am very, very excited because Draft is my favorite thing to do. And whenever I get to sort of unlock and explore a new format, that is exactly how I like to play Magic. So let's go ahead and jump into the draft. This was a pretty tough pack for me to decide what to take. So there is not a lot of things that are very exciting that aren't in black. I ultimately decided to go with a black card, even though sometimes I will try to avoid it if I know I'm passing some really powerful things in the same color, because I know in pack 2 we might struggle to find some black. But there's not really anything else here to consider. The Namada Primal Warden and the Knight, as well as the Extinguish the Light, are really the only 3 cards in the entire pack that are kind of exciting. So unfortunately, no matter which one you take, you're going to be putting your opponent into a black card. So when in doubt, I decided to go ahead and take the Primal Warden. And ultimately, the reason for this is because Domain is a really powerful archetype in this format. So I like taking this 2-color card here because we're not necessarily committing to being black-green, but we are kind of committing to ideally one of the best archetypes in the format and a very, very powerful card that can be splashed in just about any deck. All right, moving into pick 2, we are already sort of thinking about Domain in the back of our minds, and we automatically get a Morrow. Now this is a wonderful start to a Domain deck, but you have to be very careful because it does require a lot of the dual land. I'm gonna decide to take this card, but then really sort of keep my eye open and draft those lands extremely highly. Pick 3 is actually pretty straightforward, I think. There are some red cards. There are, Citizen's Arrest is a card that you really want to be considering for any deck, but it is double white, and so far we would ideally like our Domain deck to be a little bit more green-black. There are some pretty good removal spells in white that have Domain, but we're really focused on green. And at the end of the day, having access to a fixer that's built into your deck and not necessarily tied to your mana base is really good to have access to. So Deathbloom Gardener is ultimately going to be my choice here. It helps you ramp into your stuff and fixes very well in a Domain deck if you end up a little short on lands. All right, we've taken several really good cards that fit well in the Domain deck, but the one thing that we're missing is lands. So my biggest consideration here for this pick is between the Tatiova, which is a solid card in the blue-green, but also in the Domain decks. But I'm also looking at these 2 lands here, and currently we don't have any of them. Now we're only a few picks in, but they do tend to go very late. Again, Domain is a pretty strong archetype in the format. So at this point, I'm already pretty set on taking one of these lands. I just need to decide which one. Now, I will say white is pretty good in my experience in the format, and I tend to find a lot more white cards that I'm interested in splashing than blue cards. But also, I find that blue is a little bit more underdrafted, so the Tangled Islet will typically go a little bit later than the Radiant Grove. So at the end of the day, I would rather take the one that I will have less access to moving forward, and that's usually going to be the Selesnya Radiant Grove. All right, we've made it to pack 5, and I find this to be one of my sort of draft-defining moments. There is Griffin Protector, which I think is a pretty fantastic card. Plays very well, and you can certainly play it in Domain. We already have the Radiant Grove to play it as well, so it fits really well. I think white, green, black would be a fantastic start or shell to a Domain deck. But we also have Bite Down and Yavimaya. These are both cards that are fantastic in any green deck. The Yavimaya obviously will get a lot better with Domain, but the Bite Down is a fantastic thing to have access to. We already have a Morrow, as well as a Deathbloom Gardener that will play very, very well with this bite spell. No matter how exciting some of your creatures are, removal is always king. All right, pick 6. This is actually kind of a hard pick for me. I know Rada, Elvish Hydromaster are both fantastic cards in the format, but I will say that we still don't have enough lands. And we already have the Primal Wanderer, so a black splash land is exactly where I want to be no matter how much black I end up with. I really do want to play that in my Domain deck. Pick 7. This is another pretty straightforward one. You know, we have a Death Bloom, a second one, or a Root Walla. I think I'm going to be getting a lot more 2-drops, and Root Walla tends to be a card that goes around much later than your fixing and your ramp. And wonderfully right on cue, pick 8, we get a perfect 2-drop. Root Walla is a wonderful way to help round out your early game and still packs quite a punch in the late game with your domain decks. Moving on to pick 8, we've got a Bog Badger. We also have a Gaia's Might. Gaia's Might works very well with all of the domain decks. It is 1 green mana for what can amount to a ton of extra damage that your opponent won't see coming. So it's tough to play around a single green open mana, but when you're in the domain deck, it can really pack a punch. But we have to make a decision between that and the Bog Badger, and I think I'm really interested in getting a well-rounded curve and finding our pump or combat tricks much later in the draft. We're getting down to the last few picks now, and they're a bit more straightforward. At this point, there's nothing in green or black, so we have to kind of just make a decision on what color we think will be our third piece to our shell. I tend to like red. There are some really good enlist creatures. They tend to work very well with the green, and it seems to also be just the most open color. So we're going to go ahead and take a curve-filling red creature. And we're going to do the same thing here again. We don't have a ton of 2-drops. We only have that one initial Root Walla. So I think the Yavimaya Steel Crusher is a decent thing to pick up in case black doesn't really end up panning out. Another simple red card, nothing exciting. We're getting to the tail end of the pack, so a lot of these things, though playable, won't see a lot of play. With the exception of that being this Maria's Outrider. This is surprisingly good in the domain deck, and we're kind of shaping up to be a little bit more green-red than we are green-black. And this is the kind of card that can definitely pack a punch in the late game if your opponents are not expecting it. Hammerhand, last pickable, probably not making the cut in our deck. All right, moving on to pack 2. This one I think was actually a little bit straightforward to me. There are definitely a lot of playable cards here. The Knight of Dusk's Shadow, if we decided we wanted to be green-black, that's a very strong card. We actually had one in our pack 1 pick 1 as well. We also have the Neil, fantastic domain card if you think you can get all the way there. And then of course we have the Sunbathing Root Walla as well as the Dual Land, but none of those things are as powerful as the Llanowar Green Widow. This card is well above rate and it comes back multiple times. So this is a fantastic pickup for a color that we're already in that also plays very nicely with domain. Pick 2 in our pack 2 has to be one of our most disappointing picks. Something this early, I would like it to be a lot more impactful on my board state, whether that is removal or a big creature or just a well above rate creature. But looking at this, we really don't get that. Nothing here in red is exciting or green. The Bog Badger is a well-rounded 3-drop, and so is the Phyrexian Rager. But ultimately, I decided to go ahead and go with the Phyrexian Rager, only because we do have a significant number of 3-drops, and there is a really good chance that we might decide to go more towards the black than the red, because we don't have anything very powerful in red yet. So we're not married to being in red, and I do think that the Phyrexian Rager is a lot stronger than the Bog Badger, and if we end up in straight 3 colors, I would certainly rather have that in my arsenal. Pick 3 is a little bit of a gift for us. This is a Sunlit Marsh, which I'm definitely happy to pick up. The Maria's Outrider is another card I would be willing to play. The Worm, also very playable on the top end, but I don't think we're going to need it considering we already have a Morrow and an Outrider. But Outriders often go very late, and hopefully this one will wheel. Moving on to pick 4, we have the Balduvian Berserker. This is a fantastic card that really puts your opponent in a tough spot. There are a couple other cards to consider, but thankfully, because our deck is so compact into a 3-color wedge, we can opt to not take them. I know I really like the Cavalier, is a pretty strong card, but it's simply not in our colors. The only thing really competing for the same slot as the Berserker would be the Phyrexian Warhorse. But again, that's in our 3rd color, not our main 2, and I ultimately don't think it's quite as powerful as the Berserker. Even though this isn't really an enlist deck, it will still play very, very well with cards like Morrow. And here we go, we got another Morrow right off the top. We do only have a handful of dual lands, but hopefully there's still time for us to correct that and pick up a few more. Ouch, unfortunately, no dual lands here, but there is another Outrider. And again, this is a fantastic top end. We only have 5 drops so far, so picking up a few extra isn't going to hurt our curve too much. It's starting to get a little top heavy, but not overly so. Now this is actually one of the picks I agonized the most over in the entire draft. There is another Deathbloom Gardener as well as a Sunbathing Rootwalla. Now I am a little light on 2 drops. I actually only have 1 or 2, which is certainly not enough for any sort of Gruul deck. And the Deathbloom Gardener we actually already have 2 of, and we have other really relevant 3 drops. My instinct is to go straight towards the solid card that fills my curve and is relevant to my archetype. But ultimately, I ended up going with my 3rd Deathbloom Gardener, even though it was clunkier in the curve, because we already have 4 really, really powerful 5 drops that I wanted to get down on curve. So I thought skipping that 4 drop slot, which we don't have much in, and going straight to 5 was going to be very, very powerful and super consistent. Thankfully here in pick 8, we get a gifted land. Now we don't have any white spells to be casting, but that's okay. We do have black ones, and we certainly want to be hitting domain for our Morrows and our Outriders. Here we are now in pick 9, and I'm absolutely over the moon that we're getting relevant 2 drops. You know, Yavimaya Steel Crusher, not a great 2 drop, but I certainly would have been happy to put it in my deck. But the Goblin Picker, I'm actually quite high on. It's a good curve filler that helps you sort of overcome those drawn out middle games where you need more resources, but you're just drawing land, and it will help you outdraw your opponent. This pick 10, nothing here is exciting. I don't think any of this will see play, so I ultimately decided to take the uncommon for vault value. Pick 11, we've got another Outrider, and as strange as it may seem, I think it's going to make the cut. We have 3 Deathblooms, and I'm very happy to curve into this on 4. Thrilly Possibility, a very playable card, but not likely to make the cut. Nothing exciting here, moving straight on to our final pick. You know, Flowstone Kavu is actually a very decent curve filler. We do have a lot of 3 drops, so it won't likely make the cut, but we'll take it anyway as a last pick. Now here we go into pick 3, pack 1. Pretty tough choice for me. We're certainly not interested in the Deathbloom Gardener anymore. We have 3 of them already. Even though it's a fantastic card, we certainly have more than enough. And thankfully, due to the dual lands we've gotten earlier, we can consider cards like Destroy Evil. It is a pretty good removal spell that functions also as an enchantment removal, which there is a lot of relevant enchantments in the format, especially in white. So that is a very reasonable thing to splash should we find that we need to. But we are in black, we do have Bite, and there is a lot of removal in red and green and black. So I think we can go ahead and just take something a little bit more straightforward with the Fires of Victory. It is not likely, given that we aren't blue, to hit very hard, but it is ultimately card advantage if we can find some cheap blue sources. We don't have any duels for it yet, but we do have 3 Gardeners that can kick it in the late game. Pick 2 for our pack 3, we have some really good cards. Again, that 3 drop slot is more than full, so the cards on my mind here are the Mossbeard Ancient. This is a big baddie that can really beat people down in that late game. And we certainly are happy to have one of these on the top of our curve, but with the 2 Morrows and the 3 Outriders, I don't actually think that we need it. So I'm a lot more interested in the Extinguish the Light. Our removal is a little bit light, but with those dual lands that we have Haunted Marsh and 2 Sunlit Marshes for 3 totally free black sources, in addition to those Bloom Gardeners for 3 more totally free sources. So without messing with our mana in any way, we actually just have 6 sources in the deck, which I think is more than enough for us to be considering Extinguish the Light, even though it is double pipped. Pick 3 is a little underwhelming. We have another Deathbloom, which again, we have plenty. We have another Outrider, plenty of those. Now we have cards that we can consider like the Storm Runner is a very strong card, but it is double blue, and blue is the farthest thing from our domain deck. So I think the really only choice we're interested in here is the Codex. It is pretty good in a domain deck, but I don't necessarily think we need access to it, and we probably will not make the cut. But thankfully, here in pick 4, we're going to get the Warren Chief, which is a fantastic goblin that helps you get some card advantage as well as extra bodies on the board in the early game. It has menace and it's a very well-rounded creature. Thankfully, it's in both of our main colors and won't be difficult to cast. Right out of the gate here in pick 5, there are a couple things that jump out at me. The Vine Shaper Prodigy is a fantastic 2-drop that allows you to get some really good card advantage late in the game, and scalable 2-drops that are both good early or at least decent that then don't punish you for drawing them later in the game are hard to find. So that is pretty high on my tier list of 2-drops to be taking. However, thankfully we did manage to pick up some 2-drops at the end of pack 2, so we have a little bit more flexibility, and I think the Braid's Frightful Return is going to be a much more powerful card in our deck. The first 2 chapters, nothing exciting, but certainly useful if given the chance. But getting to return a creature to your hand on top of that or at the end of any of the other chapters you choose to take is going to be really good. And when our game plan is sort of Maria's Outrider to kill them, I kind of want access to more of those. Morrow would also be a fantastic return target as well. We're getting it down to the tail end of our draft, and we have a good choice between a upgraded 2-drop or the Tangled Islet. I think the Tangled Islet is going to be the best choice. It's currently our only opportunity to get blue into the deck, which is really good for a couple of our domain cards. For pick 7, I don't think Crystal Grotto is worth taking. We don't have a ton of very expensive cards, so I don't think we really need to focus on the fixing aspect with those Bloom Gardeners. So I think taking a Gaia's Might, it will likely get cut, but I think having access to it is pretty nice. Now this is a gift. Pick 8, Garna Bloodfist of Keld. This is one of the fastest choices I think I've ever made. Thankfully, the double pip part of the card is actually in one of our main colors, which is red. So splashing that black side is something we're already planning on doing because of the Warden and a few other cards here and there. I think it would be very easy to cast and definitely worth playing. This card is absolutely amazing. Pick 9, we've got a very solid 2-drop. I think this would be a little bit of an upgrade over the Yavimaya Steel Crusher, so definitely worth taking at the very least to upgrade that slot. Here we've got another batch of red creatures. It is very, very much open. We could take a 3rd Goblin Picker, but it's not going to see any play, so I ended up just taking the uncommon for the extra vault value. Nothing left, so again, uncommon for vault value. The Keldon Strike Team is not really something I'm interested in playing. Furious Bellows is definitely a card that could be played in this deck, but our playable list is pretty long. So what I would normally do is just take the Broken Wings for our sideboard, but we are drafting a Premier Draft, so it's best of 1. So ultimately I'm going to take the thing that I would like people to have less of in the format. Here we are again, just a curve-filling 4-drop at the end of the draft, and a last pick. Now that we've finished drafting, let's go ahead and jump into the deck building portion. I do want to say this is a draft walkthrough to talk about the drafting process, so I'm going to go a little bit quick here in the deck building. What I went ahead and did was just removed all of the cards that were not in color, and then I went ahead and moved all of the cards that I'm considering cutting to the right. And, you know, there was a little bit of thought process here. I think the Codex is not necessarily something we need access to. We have a lot of very heavy top end. With the Morrow, though they're not super expensive, they are very powerful. So I didn't really think that we would need it with the fact that we had a few other card draw mechanics like the Phyrexian Rager and the Fires of Victory. Moving on to the War Brute, we had 2 of them in our 4-drop slot, but I think that our 4-drop slot is actually quite full, and that's probably one of the weaker of the bunch. Sheldred's Restoration is an okay card. We're not likely to be able to kick it because we don't have access to a ton of white, and it does cost a lot of mana. So I ultimately decided that with Braid's Frightful Return, we already had one of those sort of cards in the deck. So I think that would be the weaker of the 2, and I'm happy to cut it. Flowstone Kavu, we have a lot of 3-drops oh boy, do we have a lot of 3-drops. And I think Flowstone Kavu is easily the weakest one. Thrill of Possibility, again, sort of a draw mechanic where we don't necessarily need it because we have access to cards like Phyrexian Rager and Fires of Victory. Furious Bellows is a fine card to play as a 23rd playable, but not something we need access to. Our cards are big enough. They shoot lava axes at our opponent's face, so we don't really need a bunch of combat tricks, and I think the rest of our deck will speak for itself and we won't need to have this. Battle Rage Blessing is a pretty fun card to have when you need to trade up or if you need to protect some big bombs. We don't really have that, so Death Touch and Indestructible are not two of the things that we are super interested in. Gaia's Might is a little bit of a tough cut for me because I do think we have pretty good access to Domain, so it's a cheap way to get in a ton of damage, but at the end of the day, cuts need to be made. Hammerhand is also a fine card, but not something we're super interested in here. It leaves you open to be 2-for-1, and at the end of the day, the impact is just not very high. All right, let's get these extra cards out of the deck and get into some gameplay. Let's see what we've got going on here. Boy, oh boy, do we have all of the colors we could possibly want. It is a little bit slow, but we're on the play, so I am kind of fine with that. We have some really nice ramp options, and overall, just a very well-rounded hand. We have great Domain, and we have the ramp into any 5-drop should we want to. This is great. Yeah, we're gonna go Gardener. And now we won't be able to cast our 5-drop ramp-wise, but we will be able to cast the Warden. And I think that is good enough into the Outrider. Feels pretty strong to me. A little self-mill there. All right, let's go ahead and start with the Warren Chief, and we'll play another duel. Oh no! Out with the Warden. Let's go ahead and play a pretty hefty size Lava Axe to the face attached to a 4/4 reach creature. Oh no! Well, if they want to bounce this to my hand, I don't think it's the end of the world. We just get to do another 5 damage, which, like I said, not the worst place to be. It is getting a little scary that we can't keep anything on the board. So, you know, we're starting to get into the range where maybe a 3-drop plus a 2-drop is worth it. But I do know we have a lot more Outriders in our deck, so I'm pretty happy to just keep 5-ing them in the face. That flyer is pretty good. But it does mean that they're a lot less likely to attack us this turn, which I like. All right, so I think our options would be, for me personally, I really want to get this Berserker down. It offers a fair amount of value for us. And now the question is, do we try to get a 2-for-1 with a Bite? I think the answer is yes. Now, if they block it with more creatures, I think we're okay with that. I think this is totally fine. Now the question is what would we want to bite it with? They could have a green pump spell, which makes me pretty interested in biting with a Death Toucher. Are there any black spells for 2 mana that could kill our Death Toucher? There is one. I think it's 2 mana, -2, -2. So we're not going to risk that. I'm going to go ahead and just bite with the Outrider and make sure that we get the kill here for a solid 2-for-1. And we're in a pretty solid position here. I fully intend to, instead of attacking with the Outrider, we're just going to enlist it and go from there. Our opponent can bounce one of our cards. That's totally okay. They've left themselves open for, a pretty hefty attack here. I think I want to just play the Berserker And I think I want to just play another Gardener and be willing to trade the Gardener for just about anything. We could have held open the Fires, but I think we might need Fires next turn to deal with this 4/5 creature. And we actually won't be able to. We'll go to 3 cards, and then it'll draw another, so that'll go to 4. Yep, there it is. It's a big one. Ooh, that was a great draw. That means we no longer need to tap one of our Gardeners to kill that. So 4, 5, 6, 7 damage. Not quite enough. If we kill the big creature and we enlist, I'm so sorry. I keep saying the wrong ability. It's 5 damage regardless. Now we can choose to go 5 face or go 5 to the creature, which is actually a little tough. And I think because this is a flyer, I'm going to go ahead and go to the creature. You know, it is a pretty close game. We don't have much removal left. I don't think making them discard is super relevant. We could tap this down now and get a creature back, which we couldn't cast this turn, but it does free up our mana for next turn. And if they choose not to sacrifice a non-token creature, we get to draw another card as well. So that will replace itself on turn 2, or remove their blocker, either of which I think I'm fine with. Oh, that's a great card. And that is also a great card. Wow. Okay, so they can choose to lose 2 and let me draw, which is nice. Outrider does some good damage. I can also kick this to kill the Warden, which I kind of like. And we can kick it and play a Berserker. But that would take a lot of my mana. But that card is really scary. This is just a vanilla Death Toucher now. I'm going to do it. I'm going to kick this. We'll draw a card. We'll go to 4. This will be here. We got a land, which makes me feel much better about my decision, because now we can hold open one of the Death Touchers. And that feels a lot stronger. I didn't want them to have to, us to have to chump the 5/5 should it come through. And hopefully they're just in a sticky situation. We were 1 off from being able to kill the 5/5, but I think long term, the Primal Warden is the scarier card. Oh no, are we just gonna... Oh, we have Sneaky Reach. Oh, okay, they gain a little life. Oh, do we kill them here? We're very close to killing them. We are 1 mana away from killing them. Wow. Ooh boy. That is sneaky. So the way Tatiova works, I have to read this. If you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental and gains haste. So this doesn't trample. I think I'm okay with enlisting here. And we can enlist this. That's 5. That's strong. And I also, because I'm at 5, I'm okay with killing this giant. We could put them below lethal, considering we've got another Outrider in hand, but I don't think we need to. Our board is wide enough. I think now we can just kill them as is here. -2, you got it. And another Outrider is more than enough. You know, they'll never see the 6 lava axes to the face. And don't forget, they bounced an Outrider the first time, so that was an extra 5 damage. Not a bad place to be. All right, let's get another game in. 3 colors of mana. We've got fixing. We've got a bomb 3-drop. The deck is very powerful. And I know you guys haven't seen all the matches, but we haven't decided yet which ones we're going to put into the video, but we're currently 5-0. So this is going very, very well. All right, my opponent is on the play, curves out pretty nicely, but that's totally fine. We have Domain 4 just right out of the gate, which is lovely. Domain 4 here on turn 3. We'll get to play probably the Green Widow, depending, because we have a very nice follow-up with the Grotto there. Oh, we can also play the Warden, so we don't really need the Gardener to ramp into the Outrider because we have so many powerful 4-drops as well. I think I like Widow to just keep the board in our control. We can kill all of the things. Oh, wow, that's a very, very good card. Thankfully, Widow does attack through that, which makes me very happy. But for now, I kind of just like casting... I like casting the Garda and getting very aggressive, knowing that we have so many fire, or not fire, but lava axes in our deck from here on out. Just feels very strong. And I think all of the initial damage that we can get in, and they're not going to want to trade with the Blood Fist. They're going to get in some chip damage in the air, but they're really not going to be expecting Outrider. All right, let's keep it going. I'm going to play the tapped land. I don't really think we have to play our 5-drop yet. So let's go ahead and decide after. I'm going to go ahead and play the Widow. Wow. Okay. Yeah, we're going to play the tapped land and this to get in a little extra damage next turn and hope that Outrider just finishes the job. They absolutely might kill us here, but I feel like Outrider, if they have a board clear and clear all of their things as well, that is totally okay. Wow. Okay, let's go for some damage and see what turns up. We can return the Outrider to our hand should they be able to answer it as well. Yep. And now if they have a counterspell, we'll see. Holy smokes, this deck is insane. All right, now you guys had a chance to see how the game's played. I'd love for you guys to leave me a comment and let me know what you think of Dominaria United Limited, but also about my draft process. The format is still really new and I know I have a lot to learn, but I do hope that this breakdown video was insightful for some of you guys and helps you get into Limited because it's a wonderful way to experience Magic and it's definitely a great way to build a collection on a budget. Thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you next time.